Hey everybody, I am excited because I have a very, very special guest tonight. This is definitely a first. I have a family member with me tonight. This is my big brother, Romy. Hello, Romy. Welcome.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me tonight. I promise I won't keep you long, but I had to go and unpack a lot of the stuff that you and I talk about offline because I think it would really be helpful for a lot of women. And for guys, I feel like it would really put into words what they're trying to say and really help out. So, you guys know the drill. Drop your city and state where you are watching from so that I can shout you out. All right, so let's get right into it. I want to talk about emotional availability because a lot of women get pissed off when they feel like a guy is not opening up to him. And I know that I was guilty of this where I felt like it was always by choice. He can be vulnerable or not. And I was really putting him in a category, making it a good or bad thing. So that's a lot of why I want to get into it today. But let's start off with the basics. What do you think is one of the biggest misconceptions when it comes to men? What do you think women don't really understand about a lot of guys when it comes to vulnerability?
Right off the top of my head, I believe a lot of women, and I don't want to paint with a broad brush, believe that men don't have emotional capacity,
Mm,
meaning that they don't have the ability to show their emotions.
yeah.
It's not don't have the ability to show their emotions. It's that most men are taught to suppress their emotions, and as they grow older and mature, they learn how to not only discover these emotions and also express them.
I think that it makes sense if you really think about it. Like we tell little boys, what you crying about or stop, man up and things like that. We wouldn't know as women what it feels like to not have that be our natural or knee jerk reaction. As women, if we tear up, it's not normal for us to want to hold back. Maybe if we're not in the right setting, maybe it's work or something like that. But aside from that, we usually feel pretty safe opening up and talking about whatever we feel. What is it like being on the guy's side if you're feeling it? Is it something where you're consciously going, okay, I need to tap into it now? Is it something that you can break down as far as what it feels like from a guy's perspective?
Um, the only way I could really describe it, trying to be really descriptive, it's like sitting on a volcano
Mm,
that's erupted any moment, and as a man, your job is to keep capped. That's why you have situations like with domestic violence, or when a man really has an emotional tipping point in his life, there is an eruption, for lack of a better term, or
okay.
funny. Like you were saying before, most of us, and I believe it's more generational than anything, are taught to suppress their emotions. Like when you're a little boy, when you fall, don't cry. That's what girls do, be tough. Whereas on the flip side, young ladies who eventually turn into women, they're taught to own their emotions and express them openly and outwardly.
That makes sense. When you're talking about the volcano, sitting on the volcano, I thought of a metaphor of someone standing in front of a closet door, with stuff just massively smashed inside there, and your back is up against it, and you're trying to keep it from coming out. So when you decide to go ahead and release and open that door, is it a conscious thing? Yeah, I mean, obviously, if they're erupting and it's anger, that's usually not conscious. But when it comes to falling in love or having emotions from a romantic standpoint, how does is it something that they have to, flip a switch, or does it kind of just happen to you?
Um, I would say for the majority of men, it kind of happens, but it's kind of a guided tour. First, you have to be comfortable with someone. You have to meet that one person that you're comfortable enough with to show that vulnerability. And also, in a traditional relationship, it has to be a woman that's strong enough emotionally um, and spiritually who can help guide that man through that journey and allow him to have small releases, so to speak, until
Mm.
he point where he can be fully vulnerable and fully open and fully emotional with that woman in a safe space.
I think that one of the things that I see, by the way, hello to everyone joining in. Drop your city and state so I could shout you out. I see we have Bridgetown here. Where is that? What state is that in? I don't recognize. You recognize that city, Romy?
Bridgetown?
Yeah, I don't recognize that.
I don't know. I want to say Connecticut, but I'm not sure.
I My people know that I get so into it sometimes. I don't hit the button. That's why I said we gotta just have a person who helps me over here. Thank you, Akira. She said, girl, your screen is still on the intro screen. So we'll do a second. We'll do a second hello. No wonder people are tapping in and coming back out. Thank you, Akira. I have my lovely brother here now that you could actually see him. This is a first. I've never had a family member on, let alone a sibling. So really excited. Although he's way back in the cut, you could barely make him out. Yeah, see? Yeah, my twin right here. All right, so we have a Los Angeles in the house. We have a Long Beach in the house. I swear I have such moments sometimes. I did a live stream a couple weeks ago, and I had a graphic that was like covering half of my face for literally 30 minutes. So I know I don't need to give you any ammunition, but yeah, that happened. All right, so you guys, to get back into it, we were talking about emotional vulnerability and how it is not something that comes easily to a lot of men. And it's not because there's anything wrong with them. It's that this has been a survival technique. They have been told since childhood, you reel that stuff in. You keep it in, you keep it bottled. I mean, they don't call it bottling it up, but that's what happens. You bottle it up. And Romy was describing it like a volcano waiting to erupt. I compared it to a overflowing closet door that you're trying desperately to hold closed. So I always thought of it as them having to struggle to be vulnerable, but it's more like it's probably a release eventually, like a feeling of relief when you can finally just be 100% transparent. Would you say?
Somewhat. I was just thinking of a conversation we had a while back when I was trying to help you with a relationship. One thing that women don't truly understand about men is that we're anywhere between 2 to 3, maybe even 5 times more emotional than you guys are. But we don't have the tools to deal with it or navigate with through life. That's why you see men tend to have these emotional outbursts. If you look over at Europe, they understand this historically. Okay, that's why you have certain laws in certain countries that fail to crimes of passion, particularly with men, because they know men aren't taught to deal with their emotions, passion, i.e., and when they have these outbursts, they can do things that are considered dangerous.
Right. That would make sense, though, why you hear a lot more about, well, just one, violence with men. Not to mention you guys have more testosterone, but now you're the testosterone fueling these emotions that you, like you said, you don't have the tools to handle. But that would also make sense, not excusing it, of course, or condoning it, but when men go out and go off the deep end, violently when they catch their woman cheating or things like that. You also hear a lot of men say, I would never take my woman back who cheats, but he might be a cheater. So that would explain the double standard as far as that as well, because it's like he's not equipped versus a woman, even though she's upset, she's able to still go, but we have kids together, or we have this, she's able to manage. Interesting. Welcome, Paul Arthur. Yes, I'm glad you're finally able to catch a live as well. Hey, Geneva. All right, so this is super, super interesting. Thank you guys already smashing the like button. Clearly, you guys know how to do my show better than me because I had my screen wrong for like the first 10 minutes. So, yeah, that's that. But they already know what to do. They know to hit that like button. So YouTube knows to push this out to more people who would enjoy this. All right, so I wanted to say something too. You were saying that a lot of times women think that men don't have a ton of emotions, but I also, not a contrast, but in that regard, I see a lot of women who will want a guy to be emotional, but she unknowingly does not create an environment in which he can. For example, he finally does open up and say something, and then in the heat of anger down the road, she throws it in his face. Is it worse if he's had a taste of being vulnerable and exposing himself and have it taken away, or is it about the same?
Oh no, that's even worse. When you get to a situation or get to a level in your life when you feel like you're in a safe space and you can show that alter ego, i.e., your vulnerability. If someone uses it against you, it just hardens you even more. It's way worse than the previous situation.
And that would probably explain why men shut down so radically. Like women will say, we had one fight, and then he just,
oh yeah, that's it.
It's like 0 to, nothing. Okay. So I want to talk about this. This was something that I had, and I even talked with you. I actually think this is what maybe sparked this conversation. But I was saying that I had an epiphany thanks to one of the girls I was talking to about the transition period of a man, with a man. So going from, to set this up, you guys, it's like going from him meeting you. Of course, men are visual, so maybe he sees you, he thinks you're cute, got a nice little booty, whatever. But there is a period of time that must transpire before he goes from attraction to actually being liking you and strong like and then loving you. Can you get into that a little bit more? And you guys, please report that comment. We get spammers sometimes, so go ahead and shut that down if you guys have that option and you're in. Um, what would you say a lot of women should know about that transition phase? Like, she's in it immediately, excited, head over heels. She's planning on the future. If he is not acting like he's in love right away, a lot of women, me formerly included, we would check him off and say, well, he's just playing games or he's not into me. But you were talking about that space that he needs to kind of ramp up those emotions and go from one phase to the other. Remember that part? Can you kind of get into that a little bit?
Yeah, it's transitional. Let me start with the basis. Women are taught from childhood to be nurturers. Okay, develop those relationships from the beginning. Whereas men, we're taught to be hunters.
Mm.
So we come at this relationship piece from completely different angles.
Yeah.
Transitional piece, we talked about how my wife and I talked to people at church about transitional relationships. For example, when you're dating, okay, men see it this way. Okay, you're my girlfriend, I'm your boyfriend. That is one relationship. Now, if we evolve to a point where I ask you to marry me, now we are betrothed to one another. We are engaged. But for men, that is a new relationship because no longer are you my girlfriend, now you're my fiance, but we've never operated with one another in that capacity. Whereas it is one continual relationship, okay? And don't give the men enough time to transition from one to the other. Then you bounce into marriage, okay? Now, although we've known each other as boyfriend and girlfriend, transitioned into fiance, okay, betrothed, now we're husband and wife. Although we've been together, let's say 2 to 3, maybe 4 years, I've never known you in that capacity.
Right.
And so to shift their mindset from those different relationships, even though it's a continual growth.
Gotcha.
And one of the mistakes that a lot of women make is they don't give their men that time to transition. And it also folds back over into the emotional piece. When you meet that man you really want to be with, what do you want him to show? You want him to show you his underbelly, his vulnerable side. But if I'm a 30-year-old man, you and I have been dating for 2 years, now all of a sudden you want me to turn on all the emotions, you have to realize I've been living for 30 years suppressing my emotions.
Yeah.
You have to be time to be in touch with said emotions, 2, learn how to express them, and then 3, feel comfortable enough or feel like I'm in a safe space enough with you to show you that side.
Right. And what would you say is something that a woman could do to kind of set the tone? I know don't use his vulnerability against him and things like that, but is there anything that she can say or do that will speed up that process, or is it kind of just something that has to happen on his own?
Well, she has a small part in that, but it's mainly on the guy. Like for me in my relationship, my wife was the first woman I trusted outside of my primary female caregiver, who was our great grandmother. Okay. For a lot of men, and they don't understand that dynamic, trust, particularly for black men, supersedes love.
You can say that again for the people in the back.
I love my wife, but I knew for me that we had a future together because she was the first woman I trusted in my adulthood.
And grandmother set the bar really high as far as being nurturing and being, trustworthy and things like that. Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I did want to talk about that, the way that a man looks at his mom in that type of relationship, or the primary female caretaker, as you put it, if it's not maybe his birth mother or something, that has a huge impact, you were mentioning, on the man. And I remember, was it, who's the comedian? His name is just completely, we were just talking about him this weekend. The comedian, the short
Mm.
comedian. Tucker's going to my head, but it's not Tucker. It's the other one.
Yeah.
Why
I'm
am I?
not sure.
Why am I blanking? Anyway, you guys know the comedian I'm talking about. I don't know why his name is skipping my mind right now, but I think he was talking about the fact that that men are, what is it? Men are the only ones who love unconditionally that a woman doesn't love unconditionally, and it started to create this conversation where it was saying, you know, women usually love what a man can give and things like that. They don't just love him. The only woman typically in a man's life who has just loved him unconditionally for him is usually the female caretaker. It's not what he can provide. It's not how he makes her feel. It's just this undying love for him and the willingness to do whatever he needs. So ladies, understand that you're up against that when you're trying to make him feel comfortable and things like that.
And most guys are for their mom.
You said what?
Most men are looking for their mom. Or
Yeah.
in fact, most guys won't admit that, but you always compare that woman that you're ready to spend the rest of your life with that woman who you love the most prior to her.
And I think it's the same with women and their dads too. I remember just saying to you, I'm like, if my own brother and my own dad open my car door, I'm never gonna accept anything less. Like that's the barometer in my mind for what a man looks like, is the male influences that I had as a kid growing up. So I'm trying to look at these comments because my camera is right in front of the screen, so sorry guys. Okay, Valiant Thor says, for a large percentage of modern women, marriage is like landing a dream job. Then a couple years later, demanding half ownership in the business that hired you. Family law overwhelmingly favors women. Yikes. That's a little bit of a different topic, but it is in line with I was to say what someone else said, but that was you talking about the 80% of divorce is initiated by women. But I have said this many times on my platforms. I don't like that statistic because I feel like the inference a lot of times in the way it's brought up is as though it has anything to do with love. And I don't think that the percentages are that way because men love harder and they stick around. I agree with your second statement that that divorces tend to favor women. So why would I, if I was a guy, initiate something that is going to harm me? So that statistic kind of Jacob says, my daughter walks on the inside and waits for me to open doors for her. I love that. I absolutely love that. All right, guys, I'm glad you were on time because this one's going to be short. We only have a few more minutes. I just had a couple of questions. Okay, so you were saying earlier about men having stronger emotions than women. And I actually agree with that. I think that typically the more socially accepted emotions are anger and rage and things like that. So obviously you see that a lot with guys. But I truly think that because you guys go slower typically in opening up and letting a woman in and becoming vulnerable, when you finally do cross that threshold, it's devastating. It's that much more devastating when it doesn't work out. And I think that's why it's harder for guys to bounce back. And we're starting to see a lot of guys. Have you heard of mantow, men going their own way, or however you pronounce that? Mm-hmm. What would you like to say about that?
But it's actually a lot simpler than that. You have to look at men in this situation or in this light. Men have emotional outbursts at some point in their lives, and they can't control them simply because they were never given the tools to deal with them.
Wow.
You learn as you get older, and you learn to be more in touch with who you are and how you operate mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Okay? Like the analogy I gave you prior to, when the female wants the male to show that openly honest emotional side, and he's never had to do that for his entire life, you have to give him time to transition. Like I said, that's why you see situations where men have these outbursts and they end up hurting their spouse or their significant other, or they end up killing someone because they don't have the psychological tools to deal with the emotional volcano that is boiling over inside.
Now, remember you said something, I remember because I was trying to remember everything from that conversation. It was so juicy at the time. But you were talking about how some guys can like a woman, like they have a little bit of interest, but once they start to see what the investment looks like, they don't stop liking her, but she's not worth the investment. Do you remember that part of the conversation? Can you
Yes,
expound upon that a little bit more?
and women wonder why. Based on that conversation that we had, um, when men typically see a woman that they're physically attracted to, and then you learn more about their personality, they put you in two categories. You can either be the girlfriend or you can be the wife. Okay,
Sometimes not even the girlfriend.
and not even the girlfriend. But what women don't realize, just like men, on this other analogy I'll share afterwards, is that they can talk themselves or display themselves right out of it. There's an analogy I like to use, and I share with our group, and we laugh about it. Those of us who are a little older, we understand this dynamic. When women see you, if you're out and about, and let's just keep it real, women think just like men do when it comes to the carnal area. He can get it. You'll see guys be like, oh, he can get it. Now the problem is, you can follow through as a guy and stay in that lane, or say something asinine and talk yourself right out.
Yeah.
It's the same way with women.
Yeah.
Well, how you carry yourself, how you display yourself, but that one faux pas can throw you right out of the game. It's just like an older movie, you probably don't remember this, the movie Boomerang, with Murphy and Halle Berry and Robin Gibb.
I couldn't watch, I wasn't allowed to watch movies.
So it was this womanizing executive in a marketing company. He would meet all these beautiful women, but if they had one flaw, he would dump.
That was the toe thing, the foot thing?
Bad feet.
Okay, yeah.
Sleep with one of the pretty ladies. They're laying in the afterglow. She's asleep. He pulls up the covers and sees she has raggedy feet, and he runs out. In a nutshell, that's how guys out.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of times, now, yes, there are F-boys, okay? We acknowledge there are definitely F-boys, but I never want to talk about them because it's obvious that there's no redeeming qualities. But I do want to point out that there are some men who get lumped into the category of an F-boy simply because he didn't like her. And I did a post the other day on Instagram where I was like, it doesn't make him a villain if he just doesn't like you, because you don't know the person. And so I like what you were saying about that. Sometimes it's just a matter of, him spending time and realizing, this ain't my cup of tea. And this is why I tell people, this isn't even about trying to be religious, but I tell women, if you wait to have sex, at least wait until he's made that decision. Because what happens is they see all these actions that they think are, he's giving her the green light. We're going out a lot. He's wanting to be intimate with me. He's talking to me all the time. That doesn't mean he has crossed that threshold of making that a commitment. And guys will always say, usually, like when they're really into a woman, they will bring it up. I want to lock it down, because you don't want any other dude getting on your turf. But I feel like if he doesn't bring it up, consider him the jury's still out.
Well, real men don't bring it up verbally. They convey it by their actions. Like with me and my wife, when we started dating, we talked, we don't want to be in a relationship. We hung out, but as time went on, rather quickly, we became more isolated with one another in terms of not spending time with other people, our social groups, or just seeing other people. Work week went on, Friday came, I either went to her house or she went to my house, and matriculated to what we're in now. But I used to tell my boys when we were, in that going out phase, I had a partner who would go up to young ladies and try to talk to them and get their number. And if they didn't give it to him, he would cuss them out. And I would tell him, why? You can't take it personal. It's not a loss anyway because you didn't know her.
Yeah. Right. Now, okay, so when you were talking to, I almost said her name. When you were talking to her, did you just expect her to assume that she was the only person you were talking to based on the amount of time you were spending together? Because you know me, I'm so literal. I'll be like, look, Ninja, like, is we or is we not?
Well, our generation was different. And once we just started talking to each other solely and spending time with one another solely, and that included our social groups, not potential suitors. We knew. It was that simple.
Yeah.
It was the spoken language.
All right, we have a question from Crystal Warren. She says, what motivates a man to take initiative to find that balance? I'm trying to remember exactly the balance that we were...
Balance.
Yeah, Crystal, remind us which balance you're referring to. Jacob says, men will usually lock it down, but after a divorce or significant heartbreak, things are different. Paul says, that's why I don't like when women use signs, because I have no problem speaking my mind, but I'm stuck trying to read her and make my move and get it wrong. I hate that, he said.
Yeah. Women, men are not mind readers. Okay? What we want to do is know what the problem is so we can solve it. It's not that we don't care about how you feel or what you're going through emotionally. We want to solve the problem. Where a lot of young guys make the mistake is that they come in with the mindset or the ideology or the methodology, that's what I'm looking for, to solve it, as opposed to understanding that she wants to emote first. So you know exactly what the problem is before you go straight into being the rescuer.
Right.
Not all want to be rescued.
Daddy used to always say, baby girl, you want to vent or you want my advice? So yeah. Because sometimes I was just trying to get it off my chest. I want to go back to something Paul said earlier, Paul Arthur. He said, not this man, when you're talking about the female caretaker. He said, my mother left me when I was young, and she was not willing to put forth the effort to make a relationship work with me. He said, and I'm 32 years old, which is why I had to catch myself, because I did say mom at first, but the female caretaker. Usually there's some sort of predominant female role that somebody plays, you know, role that a female plays in your life as a young child. So that's usually where you...
With Paul, he may not have had that direct person, but I'm sure indirectly there was some female in his life that he uses as a barometer to choose women today.
That makes sense. Crystal said the emotional balance. I don't know why I'm struggling with this. Because I don't know if you were talking about Crystal, the part where I was saying that a guy will find out, if he'll figure out whether or not she's worth that effort. I'm going to assume, correct me if I'm wrong, sis, in the comments, but what would you say is the difference? Or is that too broad of a thing, considering all women are different? But are there some main things, which, by the way, I have a video coming out on Tuesday, you guys. If you're subscribed, you'll get the alert. But it's the 3 things that men typically look for when they are deciding if she can go from girlfriend material to wife material. So it's very simple, straightforward stuff. You guys stick around if you want that. But Romy, do you have anything that you could think of, or like big things that would keep someone, which actually ties into one of the other questions I was going to say, what keeps a woman in the role of a hookup versus wifey material?
Well, for me personally, she had to be classy. Okay? The way she carried herself, the way she dressed, the way she groomed, her ability to communicate. You know how our family is. You know, language is a big thing. And then the big piece for me, because this is prior to me getting to know her and not knowing whether or not I could trust her, is the question I always ask myself: if this young lady and I were to have a daughter, what?
I think I cut you off because, you know, Zoom. You said if we were to have a daughter,
what could she teach her?
Got you. Yeah. I think that's super, super important. And I get women who are, let's just say, very modern, we'll call it that, who sometimes push back on my content because my content tends to be more traditional. But even though we're in 2021 and it's very modern times, most men, if you really get them in a place where they feel like they're in a safe space, want traditional women. And I think what's confusing is 2 things. One, women look at how men respond to the women who are visually appealing. And I did a post that went viral on there. I said, why does he show love to IG chicks, but then wants you to be conservative? And this is why. Just because it looks good and it gets them physically aroused does not equate to wanting to bring her home to mom and start a family with her. Complete different energy, but women are just categorizing it all as attention. All attention is not good attention.
No.
You know, because if I go streaking down the street, people are going to stare at me. It's different than people paying attention to me doing a TED Talk. So they're all looking at me, but for very different reasons. The other thing, what was I going to say? There's the two ways that men are. Oh, and the other reason is because women just feel like it's beneath them, or they're not being allowed to be themselves. And my thing is, sis, be you all day long, beloved. Like, do you. But know your audience. And if you're trying to land a guy, you're probably going to want to have your biggest options out there. Like I tell women with even things as simple as like hair. If you have the option to have longer hair, most men like longer hair. Not everything is absolute, but if you start to see norms, you want to do the things that cast the widest net. And so I've never heard a guy say, man, I want to marry a chick who's scantily clad. It's usually, man, I like it when she's, you know, she can keep a little something to the imagination.
It's like, here's the question. Do you want to be yourself or be by yourself?
Oh, let the church say amen. Crystal clarified. She said transitioning from the outbursts to being more emotionally intelligent and open. Okay, so her original question was, what motivates a man to take initiative to find that balance? Now it makes sense. So basically, what makes him want to start to develop or even recognize that he needs to start tapping into those emotions that he was told to repress before?
Or when you meet that someone that you want to invest your energy into, as a man, you will allow her to teach you and help you evolve. And if you are a highly emotional individual, you will allow that person to help you grow and learn to put tools in place to control those emotions.
That is so interesting. I think that's really helpful. And this is a great place to close out. Oh, we got an amen. Nice. I guess we could look at it the way we try to work with children. You know, like if the kid, I mean, we just had a little cousin the other day who was having an emotional outburst. Obviously, you're not going to patronize him and treat him like a child, but in a lot of ways, men can be like 10-year-old boys inside, but they're just not allowed to express that. So I think as women, if you're just cognizant of that and you keep what he says close to your vest, you don't use it against him ever, because even if you don't tell anyone to use it against him, that's doing irreparable damage. And also encouraging him. So maybe if I sense my partner is getting quiet, maybe I ask those questions. Maybe if he just suffered a loss, maybe, you know, I could prompt him and say, you know, what are you thinking right now? Because a lot of times guys don't feel, they think, and just showing them what it's like. And I think also as a woman, just expressing your emotions in a healthy way is helpful, because we as women too have to learn to curtail our emotions and bridle them, and we have to be upset without screaming, or, you know, without using profanity or things like that. So I think a lot of women struggle with how to express them in a healthy way as well. So
yeah, I'll leave you with this.
Yeah.
Women want assurance. Men want affirmation.
I like that. Very, very nice, guys. I'm super excited you got to hang out with me and my big bro. Even though a few minutes in, I had no screen up. You guys are so kind. And, you know, feel free to become a patron if you want to join my Patreon. You guys, a little $5 a month goes a long way. I can afford to get a virtual assistant, so I could just be in the zone. You guys, it's just because I give so much. I'm just in the zone and focused. That's the excuse I'm going to give you, and I'm going to stick to it. Do you have time for one more question? One more just popped in. One more question. All right, y'all. He's got family waiting for him, you guys. Is there ever a time where a man does this, without a woman's guidance, would there be a need? So for him to start doing the work on his own.
Yes, there are situations where men will do the work for themselves, but as you know, most men, we need motivation. We need a reason to do things. And what's better for a man than the love of a woman?
That's really good. All right, guys, until next time, tell someone that you love them.